I should have turned back the moment I saw the crows. They stood motionless on the gate like black statues, a dozen of them, watching my car as it climbed the frozen path. Their eyes didn't blink. They didn't fly away when I slammed the door shut. Just watched. Like they knew I didn't belong here. The road to St. Luthan's Abbey was little more than a cracked trail carved through layers of snow and pine. The mountain air bit through my coat. Each step crunched loudly beneath my boots, echoing off the ancient stone walls that towered ahead. The monastery was older than anything I had ever surveyed, its stonework heavy with moss, frost, and time. The iron gates groaned open on their own when I approached. Not a soul in sight. I hesitated. Not because I believed the rumors. I didn't. Not really. But there was something about the silence, too complete. Even the wind held its breath. I walked into the courtyard. The chapel spire leaned like it had been trying to fall for decades. Windows were dark. Doors were heavier than expected. One in particular, the main hall, had thick scratch marks near the bottom. Like something inside had tried to get out. "Mr. Wexler?" The voice came from the shadows. Low, gravelly, and far too close. I turned and saw him. Brother Edison. He was tall and thin, his black robes billowing lightly even though there was no breeze. His skin was pale like snow left too long in shadow, and his eyes were the color of faded ink. "You must be the inspector," he said. No handshake. Just that stare. "Arnold Wexler, structural engineer, Romanian Preservation Society." He nodded once. "We don't get many visitors. Not since the last one left." That pause. That cold little pause after last one. I chose not to ask. Edison led me through the main hall. The air grew colder as we walked. I don't mean chilly, I mean cold in a way that made my teeth ache. Every step echoed for too long. Every breath felt borrowed. "This abbey was built in 1432, Edison said. "They say it was the edge of the world back then." "It still feels like it," I muttered. He didn't laugh. He just stopped walking and turned slowly toward me. "Do not wander at night, Mr. Wexler. The stones here remember everything." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean echoes?" "No," he said. "I mean memory. That was our first conversation. It wasn't our strangest." I was given a small room near the east wing, bare walls, wooden bed, rusted radiator. No mirrors. A small crucifix above the door. The silence in that room pressed down on me like a heavy blanket. I unpacked my notes, unfolded the old blueprints I had received, and started comparing them to the current layout. And almost immediately, I noticed something that didn't add up. There was a room marked beneath the chapel, a circular chamber, with no entrance from any direction. No stairs. No ladder. No doorway. Just a shape. A room that, officially, shouldn't exist. That night, as I lay awake listening to the wind scratch the stone like fingernails, I told myself it was just a mistake in the documents. Old architects made errors all the time. People sealed rooms. Changed layouts. But deep in my chest, in that place where logic doesn't always reach, something whispered back. It wasn't a mistake. It was hidden. And someone wanted it to stay that way. The second day began colder than the first. I woke up with frost in my beard and a hollow ache in my bones. The monastery's old pipes groaned like dying animals in the walls. My breath curled in the air, white and ghostly. For a moment, I lay still in bed, listening. No birds. No bells. Just that strange, dragging silence pressing against the windows. I dressed in layers, grabbed my flashlight, notebook, and thermos, then headed down to the main hall. Brother Edison was already awake, or maybe he never slept. He stood near the altar with his hands behind his back, staring at a faded mural of St. Luthan casting demons into a pit. His eyes flicked to me, but he said nothing. "Morning," I offered. "Time doesn't matter here," he replied, voice brittle as dried leaves. I walked past him without replying. Something about the way he said it, like he wasn't speaking to me at all, but to the walls, or to whatever might be listening beyond them, gave me a chill worse than the cold. My work that day was focused on the western wing of the monastery, the oldest part of the structure. According to the plans I received from the Romanian Preservation Society, the entire wing had been sealed off decades ago due to structural instability. But nothing about the structure matched the diagrams. The stone was denser, darker. Some of the doorways were bricked over. And the air, it was warmer here, strangely so, like walking into someone's breath. I stopped at a section of floor beneath a crumbling archway. My boots sank ever so slightly as I stepped on one specific flagstone. I stepped off, then back on. There it was again, the faintest movement beneath my foot. I crouched and ran my hand along the edges of the stone. There was a seam, not quite visible but definitely there. I tapped it gently. Hollow. A trapdoor? No, not quite. It didn't lift. It felt fixed. But something below it moved. I put my ear to the stone. At first, nothing. Just my own breathing and the faint hum of blood in my ears. Then, so soft I almost dismissed it, a whisper. I jerked back, stood up fast, knocking my flashlight from my belt. It clattered across the floor, the beam slicing through the dust and shadows. My heart hammered. Just air, I whispered to myself. Just a shift in the foundation. Old buildings do that. But I didn't believe it. Not really. I marked the stone in my notebook, took a few pictures, and made a mental note to return later with my tools. As I turned to leave the wing, I noticed something odd on the wall near the archway. A series of faint scratch marks, almost like tally marks, 12 sets of 5, etched deep into the stone, and beneath them, a single word, carved in a language I didn't recognize. I snapped a photo and left. Back in the main hall, I passed Brother Edison again. He hadn't moved an inch. I found a warped floor in the western wing, I said casually. Might be a chamber underneath. He didn't respond right away. Then, without looking at me, he said, "The west wing is not yours to measure." I frowned. "With respect, brother, I'm here to do a full structural." "It is not yours," he interrupted. "If you continue, you will wake it." The way he said it, like the word itself had teeth, made the skin on my neck tighten. "What do you think's down there?" I asked, forcing a light tone. He finally turned to me. His eyes were pale, rimmed red from sleeplessness or something deeper. "Some things," he said, "were not built to be discovered. They were built to be contained." With that, he walked away, his robe dragging softly across the floor like dry leaves skimming a grave. That night, in my room, I reviewed the photos on my camera. I zoomed in on the scratch marks on the wall. The more I stared, the more it looked like they hadn't been carved with a tool. They were claw marks. And that single word beneath them? It was starting to appear in my dreams. I didn't know what it meant yet, but every part of me knew. I had stepped on something that was meant to stay buried. And now it was breathing back. The wall wasn't supposed to be there. I stared at it, hands trembling slightly from the cold and from the growing certainty that something had been hidden, intentionally. The blueprints I'd found in the archive clearly marked a staircase that should have continued into another chamber. But in front of me, there was only stone. Crude and newer than the rest of the monastery. Sloppy even, like someone had wanted to bury something in a hurry. I set my lantern down and ran my fingers across the surface. The mortar was softer here, slightly damp. I knocked on it hollow. My heart skipped. Something was behind it. I returned the next morning with a sledgehammer and chisel, determined. Brother Edison didn't ask what I was doing. He just watched me from the far end of the hall, hands folded into his robe, eyes too still. I didn't care. I was too far in now. Too curious. Too stupid, maybe. The first hit sent a shiver through my bones. Dust filled the air. With every strike, the wall cracked deeper, revealing darkness beyond. When a large chunk finally gave way, it collapsed inward with a low moan, like the stones themselves were warning me. Behind it was a narrow tunnel, barely wide enough for one person. The air was different, warm, damp, like breath on my neck. I lifted the lantern and stepped inside. The tunnel twisted downward. The deeper I went, the more wrong everything felt. The walls were etched with symbols. Some I recognized from religious texts. Others made my skin crawl, shapes that didn't feel human. I stopped when I reached a thick wooden door bound in iron. It had no handle, only a ring in the center, and 13 nails driven around its frame. Each one stained black. I hesitated. My instinct screamed at me to leave, to turn around and pretend this never existed. But then I thought of my sister again. The Latin words she spoke, the look of terror in her eyes. I needed to know. Maybe this was the place that connected to whatever had happened to her. With a deep breath, I gripped the ring and pulled. The nails didn't resist. They slid free with a soft metallic sigh, one by one. The door groaned open. The room beyond was round, perfectly circular. The stone was smoother here, almost polished. At the center stood a coffin. Not wooden, not marble, but some kind of dark, cold stone. Chains crisscrossed over it like a web, bolted into the floor. Each chain was etched with more of those strange symbols, glowing faintly under the lantern light. My breath caught. This room, it wasn't made to honor someone. It was made to trap something. All around the chamber, carvings covered the walls. A language I didn't understand, swirling in patterns that made my head ache. There were shackles bolted into the stone floor near the walls, like multiple people had once been bound here. Sacrifices? Guards? Witnesses? I didn't know. I raised the lantern closer to the coffin. There were faint scratch marks on its surface. Deep, frantic grooves. From the inside, suddenly the flame flickered, then died. Darkness swallowed me. I stood frozen, ears ringing with silence so heavy it felt alive. Then, I heard it. A whisper. Not loud. Not angry. Just there, slithering along the edges of the room. It spoke in a tongue I didn't understand, but the intent was clear. It was waiting, watching, smiling. I fumbled for my backup flashlight, hands shaking. The second light came on. Nothing had moved. The coffin was still sealed. The air was still warm. But I knew, deep in my bones, that I wasn't alone anymore. I stumbled backward out of the room, heart racing, breath short. I turned to leave, but just before exiting the chamber, something on the wall caught my eye. A phrase. Not in Latin. In English. Freshly etched. You heard it. Now it hears you. I ran. I couldn't sleep. The whispers on the recording kept playing in my head like a broken song. No matter how many times I tried to tell myself it was just a trick of the echo, something about the way the voice dragged certain syllables made my skin crawl. It didn't sound human. And worse, it felt familiar. By morning, the fog outside had thickened into a wall of pale gray. I grabbed my notebook, tucked the old floor plans under my arm, and decided to head into the village at the base of the mountain. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to get them from Edison, not when he kept pacing the halls like a guard dog circling a gate. The road down to the village was half buried in snow, the trees on either side like tall, silent witnesses. Every few minutes, I glanced over my shoulder. Not because I heard something, just a feeling. Like I'd left the monastery's shadow, but it hadn't let go of me. The village was old. Stone homes with crooked chimneys, roofs sagging under years of snowfall. As I walked through the narrow path between houses, a few faces peered out from behind curtains. Suspicious, tired faces. At a small tavern near the square, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The air smelled like bread and smoke. An old man sat by the fire, eyes half closed, but it was the woman behind the counter who caught my attention. Her gray hair was tied back in a scarf, and her eyes followed me like she already knew what I was here for. "You're from the monastery," she said before I even opened my mouth. I nodded. "Just doing some restoration work. I found something odd." She didn't blink. "You found the room." That stopped me cold. I pulled out the blueprints and laid them gently on the counter. Her eyes scanned them, not with surprise, but something like sorrow. "St. Luthen was never meant for worship," she whispered. "It was a prison. A holy cage." "A cage for what?" She looked at me for a long moment before pointing to the fireplace. "Sit. You need to hear the truth." I did as she said. The fire popped as if it were listening too. Long ago, before the order settled there, those mountains were considered cursed. Shepherds said their flocks vanished in the fog. Children heard voices in their sleep. The land was wrong. Crops rotted in the soil. Then a man arrived, Father Ambrose. He was not like others. He came with books, relics, and silence. He built the monastery stone by stone, around something he would never name. My breath caught. Something? The monks didn't pray to God, she continued. They prayed to keep something from waking. Every day chants. Every hour offerings. When someone left the order, they were found with their mouths sewn shut or their minds broken. But the chants continued. For centuries. I leaned forward. "So, the hidden room was built to hold it." She nodded. "It's not a room. It's a warning. The symbols bindings. The chains seals. The coffin, not for the dead. For what cannot die." Her hands trembled slightly. The last time the seal was weakened, there was fire in the sky. Villagers heard screams that came from deep in the earth. Edison's predecessor hung himself in the bell tower trying to stop it. I didn't know what to say. My mind raced, trying to piece it all together. The broken wall. The chants. The whisper in my recorder. I stood up, heart pounding. "Thank you." Before I reached the door, her voice stopped me. "Mr. Wexler," she said, and I turned. "If it speaks to you, don't answer." I didn't reply. I couldn't. The moment I stepped back into the cold, I felt like the mountain was breathing, like the air itself had teeth. And something inside me whispered back. I found Edison in the chapel. He stood alone at the altar, motionless, like a statue carved from dust and grief. The candlelight flickered across the folds of his robe, casting long shadows on the stone floor. The room smelled of melted wax and something older, damp stone, ancient air, and ash. He didn't turn when I stepped in. "I opened it," I said. That got his attention. Slowly, he raised his head, not looking at me, but at the crucifix hanging above the altar. "You mean the room?" he replied flatly, like he already knew. "Yes. I found the passage. Behind the southern wall. There was a false layer of stone. I knocked it down." He exhaled through his nose. Not a sigh. More like the sound of something cracking deep inside him. "What else did you do?" he asked. "I didn't touch anything. Just looked." I paused. "There's a coffin down there. Chains wrapped around it. And symbols carved into the walls, the floor, even the ceiling. Latin mostly." He finally turned. His face looked older in the candlelight. His skin sagged under his eyes. His lips trembled just a little. "You weren't supposed to find it," he whispered. "That room isn't part of the abbey. It predates it. We built over it. To bury it. To contain it." "What's in it?" I asked. He walked past me, slow and stiff, until he stood at the edge of a pew. He rested his hands on the wood like it was the only thing holding him up. "I was young when I came here," he said. "I thought I came to serve God. But I didn't understand then. The abbey was never about worship. It was about watching, guarding, holding something still." "Still?" I echoed. "What are you talking about?" He looked up at me with eyes that didn't blink. "We don't pray for the world here, Mr. Wexler. We pray for the seal to hold. We chant not for salvation, but silence." I felt my stomach twist. "What is it?" I asked again, my voice smaller now. Edison hesitated. Then he said, "It has no name we dare speak. But the old texts called it mutus, the silent one. A demon that speaks not with words, but with thoughts, dreams, and temptations of knowledge." I stepped back, shaking my head. "You expect me to believe that?" I said. "That there's a demon trapped in a room beneath a church?" "You open the room," he replied. "You tell me what you felt." I swallowed hard. My chest tightened. I remembered the temperature dropping as I stood in the hidden chamber. The way the air seemed heavier, thicker. The whispers on my recorder that hadn't been there when I was listening in real time. Something had been there. Watching. I felt something, I admitted. Edison closed his eyes and murmured a prayer under his breath. Then he opened them again and took a step closer. "It's not just watching, Arnold. It listens. And it remembers." I flinched when he said my name. I hadn't told him my first name. He continued. "You may have only looked. But that was enough. Now it knows you. It whispers in silence. You won't hear it with your ears. You'll hear it in your doubts. In your memories. In your questions." I didn't know what to say. My skin crawled. I felt like I was standing on the edge of something far deeper than I could understand. "I need answers," I said. "About my sister. About why she said those words before she died." Edison looked at me with something like pity. "It wants you to need answers," he said. "That's how it begins." He turned and walked away, leaving the chapel echoing with his last words. "Curiosity is the chain it pulls tight around your soul." And I stood there, heart pounding, feeling those chains begin to tighten. I don't believe in ghosts. I never have. But that night, lying in my cold little cot beneath the sagging beams of St. Luthan's, I started to doubt myself. The room I was given was narrow, plain, and smelled like old stones and candle wax. I had stacked my survey equipment in one corner, along with the journal I'd found buried beneath loose floorboards, pages full of strange symbols and chants I couldn't translate. I told myself it was all religious theater. Medieval madness, maybe. Nothing real. Then the lights flickered. Not a surge. Not a power outage. They dimmed like a hand was slowly closing over the bulb. I stared at the ceiling, waiting for the hum of electricity to die, but it never did. Just the flicker, slow and deliberate, like breath hiccuping in a dying chest. I sat up and scanned the room. The air had changed. It was thick, almost humid, even though snow still blanketed the outside. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed darker than usual. And then I noticed it, my breath. I could see it. White clouds puffing from my mouth like I was standing in a freezer. That didn't make sense. I grabbed my jacket and flashlight and stepped into the hallway. The monastery was silent. Silent in the way hospitals are at night, like something important just died. I moved down the corridor, past arched stone doorways and iron sconces. The chapel bell, which hadn't rung in decades, let out a single low groan. Then I heard the chains. Metal on metal. Slow dragging. They were coming from below. From the cellar. My feet carried me without thought. Down the narrow stairwell, where the mortar crumbled, and every creak of the wood felt louder than my heartbeat. The closer I got to the hidden room, the more my flashlight began to stutter. Then it shut off. I tapped it, shook it. Nothing. Just darkness. So I stood there listening. And in that suffocating silence, I heard whispering. Not words I could understand, just a hushed pattern, like a voice trying to mimic breath. Not from behind the wall. Not from the room. From the stairwell behind me. I turned quickly, but no one was there. I ran my fingers along the wall until I found the torch holder. It lit with a single spark from my lighter, casting golden light across the stones. And then I saw it. Scratch marks. On the stone leading to the hidden room. Deep grooves, like nails or claws, had been dragging across it. Fresh. The dust was still flaked around the edges. I felt a sudden sting on my arm and looked down. A bruise. Blue and purple, curling around my bicep like a handprint. I didn't remember hitting anything. I should have gone back. Locked my door. Pretended I never saw it. But I couldn't. Something had changed. Something had woken up. I opened the iron door to the hidden room, just enough to peek inside. The coffin was still there. Still bound in chains. But one of the chains had shifted. It no longer laid flat across the stone lid. It dangled, like something inside had pulled it from within. I slammed the door shut and backed away, every part of me shaking. I don't remember getting back to my room. I don't remember lying down. But I do remember the dream. A woman's voice, clear and soft, whispering in Latin. The words didn't make sense, but her tone did, desperation. Pleading. Then a face, my sister's, appeared behind my eyelids, mouth sewn shut with threads of ash. I woke up screaming. And for the first time in years, I prayed. Not for strength. Not for answers. But for silence. Because something below me had started to speak. And I was afraid I might start listening. The snow was falling harder that evening, tapping the stained windows like long, bony fingers. The wind howled through the cracks in the old monastery walls, and somewhere above me, the bell tower let out a dull, groaning creak, like something alive was turning in its sleep. I couldn't stop thinking about the symbols I saw carved into the stone around that coffin. Every time I closed my eyes, they danced behind my eyelids, those crooked lines and looping scripts in languages I couldn't read, but somehow felt familiar. I had taken a few pictures before Edison burned the scroll. I wasn't supposed to have them, but I did. And I had the book. It was a tattered black leather-bound thing I'd found hidden behind a brick in the library wall. Someone had sealed it away long ago. No name on the cover, no page numbers. Just yellowed pages filled with tight, handwritten text and ink sketches of rituals. Some pages were missing. Torn out. Others had strange burn marks on them. But one page caught my attention. It was written in Latin, and below it was the same circular symbol that surrounded the chained coffin in the hidden room. I don't know what possessed me to do it, but I spent hours cross-referencing the words. My Latin wasn't perfect, just some old-school training in dusty dictionaries, but I got close. It read, "He who is bound by silence awakens to the name of the curious. He stirs not by force, but by voice. Speak, and you shall be heard." My heart thumped against my ribs like a warning drum. I told myself it was superstition. Just words. Ancient nonsense from a time when people thought shadows were spirits and sickness came from demons. But I knew better. I had seen Edison's face when he saw the scroll. He was afraid. Not cautious. Not worried. Terrified. I should have stopped there. But I didn't. That night, after I was sure Edison had gone to sleep, he always locked himself in that upper chamber. I made my way back to the hidden room. The hallway seemed longer this time, like the walls themselves were pulling back. Every candle flickered harder as I passed, their flames bending toward me like they were trying to speak. When I reached the chamber, the air was thick. I couldn't breathe right, like something was pressing on my chest. Still, I stepped in. The coffin was unchanged. The chains still held. But the cold was sharper here, biting my skin even through my coat. I pulled out my notebook and read the words again. Then, in a whisper, I spoke them aloud. Collegatus est silentio, excitetur ad nomen curiosi. The room pulsed. I felt it under my feet, in my bones. A soft vibration, like a heartbeat coming from deep underground. My mouth went dry. I stumbled back, suddenly dizzy. The iron chains rattled slightly, like they were responding to something. I turned to run, my instincts screaming now, but I froze when I heard a voice. It wasn't loud. It wasn't even clear. But it was inside my head, like someone whispering directly into my mind. It said one word, Arnold. I ran. I don't remember how I got back to my room. My hands were shaking, and I had frost on my eyebrows. But I locked the door and didn't sleep. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that coffin. I saw the chains. I heard the whisper. And then, I remembered something. When my sister died, right before she went into that seizure, she said a word. One word, over and over. Arnold. But it wasn't her voice. Not really. It was just like the one I heard in that room. I don't know what I've done, but I think it knows me now. And it's listening. I didn't plan to speak the words. They came out like a cough you don't see coming, sharp, sudden, and wrong. The scroll had been hidden under a broken floorboard near the altar. I found it by accident. The paper was old, almost like dried skin. The ink had turned red-brown, and though I couldn't read all of it, some words leapt out like they were waiting for me. He who is bound by silence awakens to the name of the curious. I repeated it once in my head, then again aloud. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to prove it meant nothing. Maybe I was tired of the shadows, the whispers, the feeling that something was hiding just outside the edge of my vision. But the moment I said it out loud, the air changed. It thickened, like breathing through wet wool. The stones under my boots vibrated, gently at first, like the earth had a heartbeat. The chains on the sarcophagus, those thick, silver-lined ones, shivered. Not a lot, just enough to make the links kiss and clink together like wind chimes in a haunted house. I stumbled backward, holding the scroll like it had turned to fire. The walls of the room groaned. Literally groaned. It was deep and hollow and wet-sounding, like something very large had exhaled after holding its breath for too long. I turned to run, but the door had closed behind me. Not slammed, not locked, just closed, like it was trying to be polite about trapping me. Then I heard it, a sound I never want to hear again. Chains moving, slowly, as if something was shifting underneath them. And then a voice, not from the room, but from inside my head, like someone whispering behind my thoughts. You're the first one to ask in a long, long time. I pressed my hands to my ears, but it was already inside. The words echoed behind my eyes. I didn't hear Edison come in, but I felt his hands as he tackled me to the ground. You fool, he roared, spittle flying into my face. You said it. You let it hear you. He yanked the scroll from my hands and threw it into the small fireplace in the corner. The flames snapped up like they'd been starving for it. The parchment screamed. No, not the paper, I swear to you. It was the voice from the scroll, screaming as it burned. Edison backed away, clutching his chest. You've called to it. Now it knows your name. I tried to speak, but my mouth was dry. I sat there shaking, feeling something heavy pressed down on the room like the ceiling had dropped a few inches. What did I say? I finally whispered. Edison didn't answer right away. He stared at the coffin like it might blink. You offered it the key, he said, voice low and hollow. The demon was never chained by metal. It was bound by silence. Every chant we never spoke, every name we refused to give it, every question we chose not to ask, that's what held it. I looked at the coffin. There, where the chain met the lid, a crack had formed. Thin, barely noticeable, but wide enough for a whisper to escape. I stood up slowly. My legs were jelly. We can fix it, right? We can reseal it. Edison's face had gone pale. He looked older than before. Cracked. Like the walls. No, he said. It has heard its name. Curiosity broke the silence. The room felt colder than ever. But inside me something flickered. Not fear. Hunger. For truth. For what lay beneath the stone. And in that moment, I realized the demon hadn't only heard my voice. It had answered. And I wasn't sure I wanted to shut it out anymore. I didn't sleep that night. Not after what happened. The chains on the coffin had moved. Not just a little, I mean really moved. When I had gone down after hearing the noise, I saw them hanging loose, swinging ever so gently like they had just been touched. The room was colder than I had ever felt it. Colder than death, I imagined. But what shook me more wasn't the cold. It was what I heard when I played back my voice recorder from earlier that day. I always recorded my inspections. Habits from work. But in this one, after my own voice faded, there was something else. A whisper. Faint. Feminine. Arnold. I paused the tape. My hands were trembling. It wasn't just a whisper. It was her voice. I hadn't heard my sister's voice in nearly 10 years. Not since the night she died in that locked hospital room, screaming things no one could understand. No one but her. No one but whatever had her. I sat there for what felt like hours, just staring at the recorder. Part of me wanted to believe it was a trick of my mind, a glitch, some kind of echo. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. It was her. Something was reaching through the cracks. Something tied to her, and now tied to me. I didn't go to Edison that night. I didn't want more warnings. I needed answers. I went to the old library chamber, the one with half the ceiling caved in and dust covering every shelf. There were old prayer books, journals, and rolled parchments sealed with wax. I brought in my flashlight, a blanket, and a thermos of coffee. I wasn't going anywhere. By sunrise, I found something that made my blood freeze. A hand-drawn map of the monastery, older than the blueprints I had found. This one wasn't made for construction. It was a warding map, filled with symbols, markings, and notes in Latin. But what made my stomach twist was what was scribbled around the hidden room in the lowest part of the map. A single phrase, vincula sanguinis. I took out one of the books I had been using to translate phrases. The words meant, chains of blood. I flipped the page, and something fell out from between the books. It was a photo, a black and white one, faded and worn. My hands started shaking the moment I saw it. It was my sister, standing in front of the monastery gates, smiling. But it couldn't be. It was impossible. She had never been to Romania. I would have known. She never mentioned this place, not once. I turned the photo over. There was something scribbled in red ink on the back. He speaks beneath. I saw his eyes. That was her handwriting. I'd recognize the way she curved her R's anywhere. I backed away from the table like it had just caught fire. She had been here. Not just in dreams. Not in madness. She had come here years ago, before she ever ended up in that hospital bed. But how? And why didn't she tell anyone? I began flipping through her old journals. Yes, I had brought them. I had carried them with me ever since the funeral. I told myself it was for closure, but maybe part of me always believed I'd need them one day. One entry stood out. March 19th. I keep drawing the same door. A heavy stone door with nails and blood. Something is calling me. I don't know why, but I feel like I've been there before. Or that I'm supposed to go. Then a page later. Romania. Carpathian region. St. Luthan's Monastery. Chains of blood. I couldn't breathe. My chest was tight. All this time, I thought her death was the result of a mental breakdown, some cruel twist of the brain. But now I knew the truth was buried in these walls. She was called here. Just like I was. My fingers brushed the old stone floor, and I whispered to no one in particular. "What did you find, Emma?" No answer came. Only silence. But for the first time, I was sure that silence wasn't empty. It was watching me. Waiting. And somewhere beneath me, something had remembered her name. And now it remembered mine. The storm began just after midnight. I was in my room, flipping through the old photos again, the ones I had taken of the hidden chamber. The images had changed. I didn't know how. In one, the chains looked looser than before. In another, the carvings on the wall seemed darker, like they'd been freshly etched in blood. My hands trembled as I held the last one up to the light. There was something new, a shape behind the sarcophagus. A shadow that hadn't been there before. Something crouching. Watching. The wind screamed outside like it was in pain. Then the power cut out. Everything went black. No lights. No heat. Just the sound of wind rattling the old stone walls, and my own heart thudding in my chest. I reached for my flashlight, but it flickered like it didn't want to stay on. Even the batteries seemed afraid. The hall was colder than it should have been. My breath fogged in front of me as I stepped out. The candle sconces along the walls had all gone out. The silence was too perfect, too sharp. Then I heard it, a thud from deep below. Then another. A slow, steady rhythm. I ran. Down the spiral stone stairs, past the chapel with its shattered stained glass, past Edison's room, which was strangely open. His door was never open. I paused. The room was in shambles. Books torn, shelves knocked over, pages scattered across the floor like a blizzard of old words. And there, on the wall, written in what looked like dried blood. The silence breaks. I turned and sprinted toward the cellar. My flashlight danced across the steps, casting twisted shadows that moved when I didn't. The air grew thick with a bitter, metallic scent. Something between rust and rotting meat. When I reached the chamber door, I stopped. It was wide open. I hadn't left it that way. Inside, the chains around the coffin were broken. Snapped like dry twigs. The room pulsed with a low, deep hum, almost like the sound of something breathing from beneath the ground. I stepped closer. The sarcophagus was cracked open down the center. A thick black mist seeped from the opening, snaking across the floor like it had a mind of its own. I should have run. I should have screamed. But I couldn't move. And then I saw him. Edison. He was slumped against the far wall, blood trailing from his forehead. His eyes fluttered open as I reached him. They tried to stop it before, he croaked. They never finished the chant. They didn't seal it, fully. Who did this to you? I whispered, kneeling beside him. He didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the coffin. Then a new sound filled the room. Laughter. Soft at first. Childlike. Then deeper. Crueler. It echoed from the coffin, from the walls, from inside my own skull. My flashlight flickered out completely. The darkness was alive. It pressed in from all sides, whispering my name over and over again. Arnold. 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 Something brushed my shoulder. I turned, nothing. Then the walls cracked, spiderweb fissures tearing through the stone as if the abbey itself were groaning in pain. The symbols glowed faintly red, then dimmed. The cold air shifted. Not just colder, but hollow, like the heat had been pulled from the very soul of the room. I grabbed Edison's arm, trying to pull him up. We need to reseal it. Now, I said, my voice shaking. He looked at me with wet, terrified eyes. You already said its name, he whispered. It heard you. You gave it a door. The wind screamed again. But this time it wasn't from outside. It was coming from inside the coffin. And something was rising. Not walking. Not crawling. But lifting. I backed away, dragging Edison as best I could. My legs felt heavy. My chest tighter. And all the while, that whisper echoed around me. Arnold. You came looking for truth. And truth has found you. The coffin lid slammed shut on its own. But whatever was inside was no longer in. It was free. And it was somewhere in the dark. I moved through the hallway like a man underwater. Every step echoed behind me, but the sound didn't feel like my own. It was heavier. Slower. Like something was walking just a few steps behind me, matching my pace with hunger in its stride. The candles I had lit earlier had all gone out, snuffed by breath I hadn't felt. Only the moonlight bleeding through the stained glass gave me any direction. The hidden room was open. The chains that once wrapped the sarcophagus lay on the floor, torn and coiled like dead serpents. The stone coffin had cracked open. Not much, just a jagged slit wide enough for something thin and long to slide through. The air reeked of ash and old blood, and my breath came out in white puffs, even though the room was far beneath the freezing earth. I felt drawn to it, not just in curiosity, but like it knew me, like it remembered me. Arnold, my name. A voice, soft and warm, came from the crack in the sarcophagus. It sounded just like my sister. The voice wasn't scary. That's what made it worse. It was calm, almost kind, as if it had been waiting for years just to say my name again. The same way she had whispered it before she died, confused, tired, still holding on to something. I took a step closer, then another. The air thickened the deeper I went. It was like pushing through invisible webs. My hand brushed the edge of the stone coffin. It felt warm, alive. Something moved inside. A shape, a slither, a presence. Then it spoke again. I know why you came. I can show you. I closed my eyes and I saw her. My sister, bound to a bed in that cold church room all those years ago, crying, screaming in Latin, a language she never learned. Her eyes were rolled back, but something inside them was aware. Watching, pleading. You want to know why she died? Why she suffered? I can tell you. Let me in. The voice shifted. It wasn't just her now. It was layered, deeper, older, as if hundreds of voices were speaking through one tongue, taking turns behind a familiar face. And for a moment, I almost said yes. Then a hand gripped my shoulder. Don't listen to it, Edison said, panting. His face was pale. Blood dried across his temple. He must have followed me down. It only speaks in truths that cut. It knows your grief, and it will wear it like skin. He pulled me back, but my feet wouldn't move. My hands still touched the coffin. She called to me, I whispered. It wasn't her, Edison said. It used her voice. That's what it does. It slips into what we love, and when we open the door, it eats. I looked at him. For the first time since I met Edison, he wasn't angry or bitter. He looked tired, scared, honest. I need to know why she died, I said. You already know, he replied softly. She opened herself to something that whispered in her grief. And now you've heard it too. I turned to the coffin. It pulsed slightly like something breathing just beneath stone. You said the seal needs a body. Edison's face hardened. Yes. I understood then. I understood what he had been doing all these years. He was the final lock. The living one. His chants, his prayers, his very presence kept it weak. But now he was dying. Old. Worn out. That's why it stirred. That's why it reached out to me. It chose me. He didn't deny it. You'll be trapped in here forever, he said. No light. No warmth. Just whispers in the dark. I nodded. But it'll stop calling out. No more voices. No more sisters. No more victims. Edison placed his hand over mine. Are you sure? I swallowed the fear in my throat. Close the coffin. Together, we dragged the lid shut. It was heavier than I imagined. The room groaned as if the stone itself cried out. But we closed it, and I slid into place beside it, where the chains were once fixed. Wrap them, I said. Edison's hands trembled, but he did it. The iron was cold, but it felt right, like the last puzzle piece falling into place. He began chanting again. The same low hum I'd heard every night since arriving. But this time the words made sense. They were about silence. About ceiling. About mercy disguised as prison. As the final word left his lips, the lights died completely. And then nothing. No voices. No whispers. Just dark. For the first time, the monastery felt quiet. For the first time, I felt peace. The room was breathing again. I could feel it in the way the air pulsed, slow, steady, almost like a heartbeat buried deep in the stone. My boots crunched softly over the cracked floor as I stepped inside the hidden chamber. The iron chains that once wrapped the coffin now lay scattered across the floor like dead snakes. The lid of the stone coffin was off-center, nudged open just enough to reveal a darkness that didn't belong to this world. Edison was slumped against the wall behind me, blood trickling from a gash above his eye. He was still alive, but barely. I had dragged him here after the lights exploded, and the wind outside howled like it had a soul. His robes were torn, his fingers burnt. I didn't know what had happened to him while I was gone searching for help. But I knew it was here now, the thing we had both feared. The voice inside the coffin was whispering again. But this time, it didn't sound like a stranger. It sounded like my sister, Arnold. It was her voice, soft, broken, the way she sounded the last time I saw her, strapped to that hospital bed, muttering in Latin as her eyes stared through me. I dropped to my knees beside the coffin. My hands trembled as I reached out to the stone lid. Just a little more. I had to know. I needed to see what took her from me. What marked her dreams. What whispered to her from the dark. Edison's voice broke the silence behind me, hoarse and raw. Don't. You've already let it taste the air. If you open it now, it will wear your body like a coat. I looked back at him. His face was pale, eyes sunken like two black pits. I need answers, I said. I need the truth. You won't find truth in there, he said. Only hunger. The kind that speaks your name in the mirror. The kind that waits until you're weak. It lies. That voice, it's not her. I turned back to the coffin. My breath hung in the air like fog. You saw her symbols, I said. You knew she was connected to this place. I did, Edison admitted. She heard the voice just like you. That's why I tried to stop the ritual. She wasn't possessed, she was chosen. The lid began to slide by itself. A thin hand, pale and wet like wax, curled over the edge. I should have run. I should have screamed. But all I did was whisper, Rebecca. And then the hand withdrew. Slowly. Quietly. The lid slid back into place. I felt a pressure in my chest, like something huge and ancient had exhaled. The chamber went still. The whispering stopped. I looked down and realized my foot had crossed the boundary of the circle, an ancient ring of salt and ash. The seal was broken because of me. I couldn't leave it like this. Edison couldn't survive another containment ritual. There was no one left who understood the rites. Except me. I stood and looked at the chains, the symbols, the coffin, and then I understood. The room wasn't just built to trap something evil. It was built to be watched, to be tended, to be lived in. I looked at Edison one last time. He nodded, though tears ran silently down his cheeks. I'll finish the chant, he said. I'll lock the door from the outside. I picked up the broken chains, rewrapped them around the coffin, and stepped into the center of the room. The circle reformed behind me as Edison used the last of his strength to redraw it with salt and blood. The stone door began to close. I heard it, just before the last sliver of light disappeared. Thank you for listening, the voice whispered from the coffin. And then darkness took me. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I finally understood. The truth isn't light or clarity. It's the weight you carry so others don't have to. And now, I carry it here, beneath the monastery in silence. Waiting. Watching. Until someone else comes looking for answers. I don't know how long I've been down here. Time doesn't feel real in this place. There are no windows. No sunrises or sunsets. Just stone. Cold, damp, breathing stone. And the silence, it's alive. At first, it was unbearable. Every heartbeat echoed like a hammer against my ribs. I would pace the circle of this room, over and over, trying to make sense of what I'd done. But there's no going back. Not now. I remember the moment the chains pulled tight again, sealing me in. I wasn't afraid then. I was calm. In a way, I felt chosen. Or maybe just resigned. I had always searched for answers, for truth, for something to explain why my sister screamed in Latin and tore her own skin raw before the end. I thought I needed to open the coffin to find it, but the truth wasn't inside that box. It was in the cost. I'm not alone in here. Not really. It watches me. It speaks sometimes, not in words, but in feelings. In memories that aren't mine. I see burning fields. Faces I've never known, whispering my name in their death rattles. I feel its hunger, not for flesh, but for awareness. It feeds on curiosity. That's why the monks hid it. That's why they built this room. Not to kill it. To contain its voice. To trap the question. And I am the final lock. Edison tried to visit once. I heard his voice beyond the wall, reciting the verses. We didn't speak. He knew better. One word, and it might hear him too. I think he's dead now. Or gone. The silence beyond the stone is too thick. Too still. Sometimes I forget my own name. But it remembers. It whispers it when I sleep. It paints pictures on the walls in shadow and dust. It waits. Patiently. Because it knows someone will come. Eventually, someone always does. They'll find the cracks. They'll feel the warmth. They'll hear the hum behind the stone and wonder, what's hidden here? And they'll start asking questions. That's all it needs. Just one question. One voice. One key. Until then, I wait. I listen. I breathe. And I pray, not to God, but to ignorance. Because if someone speaks to it again, the silence breaks.